As President Trump is unveiling his planned tariff rates for imports from 8 countries.
And in that plan, there is an unusual demand for Brazil. He's threatening to force American businesses to pay a 50% duty on goods they import from the country.
It's going to be a great thing for our country. I think it's going to be a fair thing for the world. And we really haven't had too many complaints because I'm keeping them at a very low number, very conservative, as you would say, number. And we haven't had, I'm sure they will be complaining at certain points, but we haven't had complaints.
This was not a tweet. This was not a rally soundbite. This was a direct and deliberate shot across the Atlantic. On July 9th, 2025, Donald Trump announced a 50% tariff on all Brazilian imports. Not specific industries, not phased rates, not warnings, just one flat, thunderous declaration. Everything from Brazil entering the United States will now face an economic wall twice as steep as anything in recent memory. What triggered this? According to Trump, it was Brazil's treatment of Jair Bolsonaro, the former Brazilian president and Trump ally now on trial in São Paulo. Trump's statement was posted in bold, defiant language across social media platforms. He called the prosecution a witch hunt, demanded that it end immediately, and declared that the United States would act accordingly. And act it did. YouTube is not the biggest fan of content like this, but we believe people deserve to hear the truth. If you agree, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us beat the algorithm and keep going. We really appreciate the support. But this is not just about one man. This is not just about Brazil. This is about what happens when global diplomacy collides with personal politics. This is about the United States imposing a tariff so large, so disproportionately severe, that even veteran trade negotiators are reeling. And this is about what happens next. Because this was not the end of a trade war. This was the opening strike. The number 50 matters. No other country, under the Trump tariff regime of the past or present, has ever been hit with such a sweeping percentage. Even China, at the height of the trade standoff, faced tariffs in the 20 to 30% range across specific sectors. 50% across the board is not a policy correction. It is a message, a warning, a form of geopolitical punishment masquerading as trade reform. Brazil did not take long to respond. On July 10th, just hours after Trump's declaration, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva convened an emergency cabinet meeting. This was not symbolic, it was strategic. The Lula administration announced a retaliatory review under Brazil's economic reciprocity law, which allows countermeasures against any foreign country that imposes tariffs without negotiation. Brazil's finance minister Fernando Haddad condemned the action as unsustainable and publicly questioned the motivations behind it. He said Brazil was open to diplomacy, but not intimidation. The economic stakes could not be clearer. Brazil is not just a random trading partner. It is the world's largest exporter of coffee. It dominates the global supply of orange juice, sugar, beef, and ethanol. And all of those commodities flow directly into American grocery stores. With a 50% tariff now hanging over them, the cost of everyday staples in the United States is likely to rise sharply. Your morning coffee? Pressure. Your breakfast juice? Scarcer. Your burger? More expensive. This is not hypothetical. It is already happening. Within 24 hours of the tariff announcement, Brazil's real currency fell nearly 2%, briefly recovered, and then started sliding again. The São Paulo stock index dipped by more than 0.5%. In Washington, lawmakers began asking the obvious question, why now? Because here is the twist that makes this story even more staggering. According to the United States Census Bureau, the United States actually runs a trade surplus with Brazil. Let that sink in. The United States exports more to Brazil than it imports. Last year, the export total was approximately $49 billion, compared to $42 billion in imports. That is a $7 billion surplus, not a deficit. Brazil is the 15th largest trading partner for the United States, not even in the top 10. So when Trump claims this is about economic balance, the math does not back it up. Instead, analysts say this move is personal, strategic, and politically calculated. Jair Bolsonaro, a controversial figure both inside and outside Brazil, has been one of Trump's closest international allies. Their shared populist language, mutual endorsements, and parallel political strategies have linked them in the global narrative of post-pandemic right-wing resurgence. Bolsonaro's trial threatens not just his political legacy, but the global ideological network that Trump has relied on. That is why Trump is acting, and it is why economists, policy experts, and even conservative-leaning business leaders are warning that this could trigger something far more damaging than a price spike. It could destabilize trust. The United States food supply is more fragile than many realize. Nearly 30% of its imported beef comes from South America, with Brazil as the dominant contributor. Orange juice shortages have already plagued certain states due to domestic weather damage. Now, with a 50% tariff slapped onto Brazilian shipments, those gaps may widen, not because Brazil will stop shipping, but because American distributors will stop buying. They cannot afford to pay double. Meanwhile, Trump's own policy advisors have remained mostly silent. Some privately acknowledge that the tariff decision bypassed traditional trade channels. It was not the result of a Department of Commerce investigation. It was not pushed by the United States Trade Representative. It was a direct order, a presidential declaration bypassing bureaucracy. That is legal under emergency powers and executive discretion, but it is also unusual because it puts the weight of the entire American import infrastructure into the hands of one decision maker, based on a grievance that is not tied to a specific product, but to a political event overseas. From Wall Street to São Paulo, the ripple effects were instant. Analysts warned that the 50% figure was far beyond anything previously priced into markets. Investors had anticipated some new tariffs, perhaps in the 10 to 15% range, especially as Trump signaled tougher stances in recent weeks. But 50? That was beyond expectations. Some commodities traders scrambled to hedge coffee and beef futures. Others pulled contracts entirely. By late afternoon, shipping firms were already warning clients that Brazil-bound goods might face delays, as logistics companies awaited further clarification on enforcement mechanisms. And that leads to the next critical question. How exactly will this be enforced? Will it be a customs duty added at port entry? Will it require certification of origin to distinguish Brazilian products from others? Will companies that source from Brazil but manufacture elsewhere be caught in the net? None of that has been clarified. As of July 10th, there is no full implementation guide, which means confusion. And in trade, confusion always leads to cost. Brazil is not standing alone either. In regional blocs across Latin America, leaders are watching this unfold with deep concern. Argentina, Chile, and Colombia have all issued quiet statements urging restraint. Even Mexico, which has had its own tariff battles with the United States, expressed solidarity with Brazil's right to due process. That signals something far bigger than a bilateral dispute. It signals a fracture, a warning to the rest of the Western Hemisphere that political alignment no longer guarantees trade stability. The irony is that this move comes at a time when the global economy is already reeling from inflation, supply chain disruptions, and political instability. The International Monetary Fund recently downgraded global growth projections. Energy markets remain volatile. Food insecurity is rising across the developing world. And in the middle of this, the United States, the largest importer of Brazilian agricultural products, has just torched one of its most stable commercial bridges. Even seasoned Trump supporters within the business community are unsure how to spin this. Agricultural lobbies are alarmed. Retail grocery chains are preparing for higher costs, and logistics firms are rerouting cargo. Some industries will try to pivot to suppliers in Argentina or Australia, but those transitions take time. Months, sometimes years, and in the meantime, American consumers will feel the weight. That weight will not be abstract. It will show up at the checkout counter. That gallon of orange juice that cost $4 may soon cost $6. That steak you buy once a month, maybe you skip it. And for small businesses that rely on Brazilian leather, ethanol, sugar, or even charcoal, this could mean closure, because those are not luxury goods. They are operational materials, inputs, essentials. But perhaps the most dangerous piece of all is the precedent. If tariffs are now a tool for personal retaliation, used not because of unfair trade practices, but because a foreign government prosecutes an ally, then what comes next? Will a judicial decision in Europe spark similar moves? Will criminal charges in Asia bring down sanctions? This is the slippery slope. And every economist warning about this moment is not talking about Brazil. They are talking about trust. Trust that trade policy will be based on economics, not grudges. Trust that supply chains will be stable. Trust that the rules will not change overnight because of a political feud 5,000 miles away. When that trust breaks, companies pull back, investors hesitate, and ordinary people pay the price. Trump's defenders argue that he is protecting ideological allies and drawing a line in the sand. His critics say he is politicizing trade in a way that will damage both economies. But both sides agree on one thing. This move is unprecedented, not just in scale, not just in speed, but in symbolism. 50% is not just a number, it is a message, a line, a decision to reshape international trade based not on supply, demand, or deficit, but on power, loyalty, and retribution. As the world watches Brazil's next move and American importers scramble for answers, one thing is clear: the rules have changed. And if Brazil retaliates, as it has threatened to do, the next wave of tariffs may not just affect coffee or beef. It could hit aerospace, energy, metals, and manufacturing. It could tip fragile economies into deeper crisis, and it could turn one act of retaliation into a full-blown trade war. The next few days will be critical. Will the United States backtrack, negotiate, or escalate further? Will Brazil strike back with targeted penalties of its own, or will global pressure force both sides to the table? One thing is certain. In this new era of weaponized tariffs, no commodity is safe, no alliance is sacred, and no economy is immune.